Today we are going to cover the lesson titled Reasoning. So by the end of this session you will be able to understand the concept of reasoning along with its nature. You will also get familiar with the basic structure and elements of logical reasoning arguments, and you will also be able to differentiate between types of reasoning that includes inductive and deductive. You will also know subtypes in deductive reasoning that includes conditional and syllogistic reasoning, and subtypes of inductive reasoning that includes causal inference and categorical inference. And finally, you will also get to know errors that takes place in the process of reasoning. So dear students, we humans are referred as rational beings. Do you know why? It's because we think before we act. I mean, to be more specific, we follow a particular logic to make decisions, and this is nothing but reasoning. In reasoning, we move from what is already known to infer a new conclusion. In our day-to-day lives, we reason in order to make judgments. We reason to solve a problem. We reason in decision-making process. For example, when you see a cloudy sky, you infer that it is going to rain and you may decide to take an umbrella. Or when you hear a hissing sound within the bushes, you may infer that there is a snake. In the two scenarios, we inferred basing on what? Basing on our previous experiences. Reasoning is a central activity in intelligent thinking, and that's the reason in most of the competitive exams you were given reasoning statements to test your general knowledge and intelligence abilities. Reasoning process also allows us to use our knowledge in new ways. Consciously or unconsciously, we do apply reasoning while we encounter with various problems in several ways. The skills of reasoning is quite important. So before getting to know about the different types of reasoning and the logical statements of reasoning, let's first try to understand the definition of reasoning. The simple and broad definition of reasoning is the process of drawing conclusions, which means reasoning helps us to draw conclusions with the information available to us. And according to Northrop, reasoning is a logical thinking process that results in a decision or conclusion. Garrett says reasoning is a stepwise thinking with a purpose or goal in mind. Markman defined reasoning as a process that enables humans to go beyond the information that is readily available in the environment. So reasoning process often take place subconsciously and within seconds, but sometimes we have to put conscious effort to reach conclusion when we are challenged with the tough situations or question. So reasoning helps an individual to explore mentally the cause and effect relationship of an event or solution of a problem by adopting some well organized systematic steps based on previous experiences combined with the present observations. So basing on these definitions, we can know that just engaging in vague thinking is not qualified as reasoning. The nature of reasoning includes the following. The first is reasoning is goal directed, and then reasoning is rational by nature, and reasoning is a cognitive activity in which we transform information reasoning is basically a controlled thinking process. It is also a process that involves inference, and it is directly related to some problem or question. So now let me introduce to you logical reasoning. So appreciable skills in reasoning is usually visible in some formal context like carefully laid out of decisions in political matters and academic questions. Scientists trace through implications of their theories when they develop new drug for rare disease, etc. So such innovations and inventions are possible when reasoning is executed carefully, and that can be possible through logical reasoning. Okay, so students, now don't get confused thinking is logical reasoning is different from reasoning. No, it's just as high quality reasoning is called logical reasoning or critical thinking. So logical reasoning formally is the study of arguments and work out whether it is correct or not. So to understand the structure of logical arguments, let me introduce to you some basic terminologies. If you are good with these basic terminologies, it will be easy for you further to understand the types of reasoning. Not only that, even to attempt such reasoning questions in your competitive exams, understanding this basic structure of logical reasoning is very important. So the first thing I want to introduce to you is argument. An argument is a conclusion with supporting statements, and logical arguments are constructed according to certain rules so as to minimize the errors. Now the second basic component of logical reasoning includes proposition. A proposition or a statement is a sentence which is either true or false. Now coming to premise, a proposition or a statement that forms basis of an argument or from which a conclusion is drawn. Okay, and the final element of logical reasoning or logical reasoning statements includes conclusion. A proposition or statement that is justified by a number of premises. Is it sounding similar to you all four and it's confusing? Don't worry, I have an example. Seeing this example, you will be able to understand what I'm trying to convey. So let's see this example. Okay, so all spiders have 8 legs. This is the first statement. And the second one is tarantula is a type of a spider. And the third statement is therefore tarantula has 8 legs. So these are the 3 statements I have, and these 3 together is known as argument. Okay, so first, second, that is I coded them as P1, P2 and C. All of them can be called as an argument together as a set, and these P1, P2 and C are known as propositions, whereas P1 and P2 are the premises. Let's discuss types of reasoning. Reasoning encompasses all thinking activities that involves making or testing inferences. These inferences can be made in 2 ways known as deductive and inductive reasoning. Cognitive psychologists along with philosophers draw many distinctions between kinds of reasoning, but deductive and inductive is considered to be the most common and well-known distinction. So first let's discuss deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is a process of reasoning from one or more general statements regarding what is known to reach a logically certain conclusion. Deductive reasoning goes from general to the specific or particular. In deductive reasoning, no new information is added. The conclusion drawn represents information that was already implicit in the premises. So to make you better understand, I have an example for you. If you can see over here, now let's take an example which suits your context, okay. So, the first statement is all graduate students of psychology enrolled for MOOC course. I repeat, I am saying all psychology graduate students enrolled for MOOC course. There is no exception. Now, the second statement says Priyanka is a graduate student of psychology. Priyanka is a graduate student of psychology. Therefore, what would be the conclusion? Therefore, Priyanka enrolled for MOOC course. If you can see the illustration on your screen, what it is saying, I taken conclusion or I decided or I reasoned that Priyanka belongs to the set, because there is no exception. All students of graduate psychology enrolled for MOOC and Priyanka belongs to the same group. So, I can conveniently conclude that even Priyanka might have enrolled for MOOC course because she belongs to the same group. So, we do not go beyond the information which is available to us in deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning, if performed correctly, results in conclusion that are said to have deductive validity. An argument is deductively valid if and only if it is impossible for the premise to be true and the conclusion or conclusions to be false. Deductive validity thus provides the reasoner with a nice guarantee. Now, within deductive reasoning, there are two kinds. The first, I would say, is conditional reasoning. In conditional reasoning, the reasoner must draw conclusion based on an if-then proposition. The conditional if-then proposition states that if antecedent condition P is met, then consequent event Q follows. For example, if students prepare well, then they will get qualified in entrance exam. If then proposition. So, if you have established a conditional proposition, then you may draw a well reasoned conclusion. The usual set of conditional propositions from which you can draw a well reasoned conclusion is if P, then Q. P, therefore, there will be Q. So, let us prolong the same example. For example, if students prepared well, then they will get qualified in entrance exam. Then the following statement is those students prepared well. Then the conclusion will be therefore, they will get qualified in entrance exam. Now, let us discuss the second type, that is syllogistic reasoning. The other type of deductive reasoning in which it is based on the use of syllogisms. Syllogisms are deductive arguments that involve drawing conclusions from two premises. All syllogisms consist of a major premise and a minor premise and then a conclusion. So, important thing to remember is there will be two premises just like any other, but one is a major premise, the second one is a minor premise. So, let us take another example. Premise 1, the shopping malls accept all major credit cards. Now, the second premise is MasterCard is a major credit card. Then what will be the conclusion? The conclusion will be the shopping mall accepts MasterCard. So, as we are clear with deductive reasoning and its subtypes, let us discuss inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is a process of reasoning from specific facts or observations to reach a likely conclusion that may explain the facts. Inductive reasoning goes from specific to the general. If you now see, there is a difference in deductive general to specific, in inductive specific to general. So, in inductive reasoning, conclusion may contain new information which is not present in the premises. For example, let us take the same example and twist it. Okay? Priyanka and Sindhu are graduate students of psychology. Okay? Now, Priyanka and Sindhu enrolled for MOOC course. This is the second premise. Therefore, all graduate students of psychology enrolled for MOOC course. So what I'm doing, what is the information I have? Tell me. I have an information that Priyanka and Sindhu, two students whomever I know, have enrolled to the course of MOOCs and they belong to graduate psychology. So I am concluding that maybe all other students who are doing their graduation in psychology might have enrolled in a MOOC course. What I am doing? I am going beyond the information which is available to me. If you see the image on your screen, there is a tip of information with me, that is Sindhu and Priyanka. But what I am doing? I am going beyond that information and elaborating. So that's the difference between an inductive and deductive. So in general, inductive reasoning deals with probable truth, not guaranteed truth. Assuming that inductive reasoning has begun with true premises and followed acceptable principles, it has the property of inductive strength. An argument that has inductive strength if it is improbable but not impossible for the premises to be true and the conclusions false. So as we are clear with inductive reasoning, let's go and discuss types of inductive reasoning. The first one is causal inferences. So in causal inference, one reasons to the conclusion that something is or likely to be the cause of something else. For example, in the summer there are ducks on our pond. Therefore, summer will bring ducks to our pond. So I am assuming that, basing on the available information, that summer is causing the ducks come. Okay. So now the second type of inductive reasoning is categorical inference. In a categorical inference, one make a judgment about whether something is or likely to be a member of certain category. For example, upon seeing a reptile one has never seen before, a person with a limited knowledge of crocodiles may be confident that what he is seen is a crocodile, but less certain about other specific species. So being familiar with the limited knowledge of one category can also make us reason differently. So as we are familiar now with what is reasoning, its nature, types of reasoning and the subtypes of respective types of reasoning, there is also a possibility that in this whole process of reasoning things we might commit errors or we might get biased. So let's discuss errors in reasoning. There are many types of errors that might take place in inductive and deductive reasoning. One of the most important cognitive biases that occur is confirmative bias. It is our tendency to selectively look for information that confirms our existing views and to overlook information that argues against it. This phenomenon describes the fact that people tend to decide in terms of what they themselves believe to be true or good. If, for example, someone believes that one has bad luck on Friday the 13th, he or she will especially look for every negative happening at this particular date, but will be inattentive to negative happenings on other days. Now this behavior strengthens the belief that there exists a relationship between the Friday the 13th and having bad luck. This example shows that the actual information is not taken into account to come to a conclusion, but only the information which supports one's own belief. So the second type of the common errors which we commit comes under the category of heuristics. In a process of inductive reasoning, people often make use of certain heuristics which lead in many cases quickly to adequate conclusions, but sometimes they may lead to errors. In heuristics, especially we are going to talk about availability heuristic and representativeness heuristics. In availability heuristics, things that are more easily remembered are judged to be prevalent. To make you understand better, let me share an example with you. In an experiment, the participants were asked to choose from two different lists that cause of death which occur more often. Because of the available heuristic, people judged more spectacular causes like homicide or tornado to cause more deaths than others like asthma. The reason for the participants' answer in such a way is that, for example, films and news and television are very often about spectacular and interesting cause of death. This information is much more available to the participants in the experiment rather than the lot of number of deaths which happens because of asthma. And the second kind of heuristic is the representativeness heuristic. If people have to judge the probability of an event, they try to find a comparable event and assume the two events have a similar probability. Amos and Daniel conducted an experiment to show this particular phenomena. What they do is they presented a task to the participants in which they gave this instruction to the participants. They said, we randomly chose a man from the population of the US. His name is Robert, who wears glasses, speaks quietly and reads a lot. It is more likely that he is a librarian or a farmer. This is the question they were asked to the participants, whether he is a librarian or a farmer. What would be your guess basing on the information provided by them? So, most of the participants answered that Robert is a librarian, which is an effect of representative heuristics, because he is silent, he reads a lot, he is wearing spectacles. So, the comparable event which the participants chose was the one of a typical librarian, as Robert, with his attributes of speaking quietly and wearing glasses, resembles this event more than the event of typical farmer. So, visually we do not imagine farmer with these kind of attributes, but there is a possibility that farmer may also have these attributes. So, the event of a typical librarian is a better comparable with Robert than the event of a typical farmer. Of course, this effect sometimes may lead to an error, and it is perfectly possible that the case can be the other way. So, the confirmation bias and the two type of heuristics are only some of the examples which can create errors while we are reasoning. Now, students, you might have come across the similar errors when you come across the topic of problem solving and decision making. As I told you, all these concepts of reasoning, decision making, problem solving overlap with each other all the time. These errors we might commit in any one of them. So, as we are done with even discussing the errors, let us conclude this session with a brief summary of what we have learned till now. We came to know that reasoning is a logical thinking process that results in a decision or conclusion. Then we differentiated vague thinking from reasoning by emphasizing on the nature of thinking that is goal directed and evolves on rational grounds. We also discussed types of reasoning, that is inductive versus deductive, and their subtypes as well, with clear examples. Finally, we focused on the potential sources of errors that might an individual undergo while engaging in reasoning, which includes confirmation bias and heuristics. Thank you.